Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Today, I'm speaking with Amanda. Amanda, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, we're just going to jump right in. And today, we're talking about financial planning. And it's really hard for people, especially I find nowadays where inflation around the world, it's not just one country, it seems to be everywhere. So, part of the way people are trying to combat that is to move abroad, to find places that have a lower cost of living. Lots of times they're looking for better weather, whatever it is that's ideal for that individual, and different lifestyles. So, what are some things to consider that you find are maybe the most overlooked things when people are looking at financial planning?
I think financial planning is the complex part of it, but there's so much more before you actually, take off to Mexico or Bali or wherever it is that you want to go. For so many, hopefully it's somewhere you've been many times before and you've holidayed and you're familiar with the place instead of just turning up when you hang up the retirement boots and go, that's it, I'm off to this third world country and, for 3 to 6 months of the year and hope it works out. So the being comfortable and familiar with where you're going is really important. Understanding what the currency is and what it buys, where you're going. And I think sitting down with your financial advisor before you leave is really important because many advisors, by law, can't give financial advice when you're in a different country. They're very limited to being able to meet you when you're in the country they're at because that's the only place they're licensed to give advice in. And that's pretty much a global rule. So, sitting with your advisor before you head off, or even having a series of meetings, is really important instead of just going off and then ringing up and going, hey, I'm here, now what? Because they may be able to say to you, we actually can't give you advice right now. So it's really important to seek that advice before you jump on the plane or boat.
That's very interesting. I didn't really think about it that way, just thinking that, if this person's been my financial advisor for so long and maybe they know what I'm doing, that I can call up because they're still my advisor, especially if I have my accounts and investments there. But if it's where I physically am makes a difference, that's a very important thing for people to be aware of, that, you want to have many conversations before
Absolutely.
leaving.
And for some, if you are going to physically relocate permanently, you may actually need a new advisor altogether. Because if the person can't look after you while you're somewhere else, you may need someone who does have a different license or deals exclusively with expats who knows what you're going through. So it may even have to mean a transition of advisors if that's something you're considering. So that's another thing you're going to want to know if you're going to be comfortable with.
Yeah, that is a really good point. I mean, I didn't even think of that at all. So very, very important for that knowledge to start. So then pre-planning, because there's some people that I understand, because I'm a little bit more of the don't plan so much, just do and kind of figure it out as I go. But at the same point, with that being said, I have moved internationally several times. So there's a lot of things that I probably do and do consider and think about, but it's such second nature to me that I don't really realize that I've made those decisions, and I'm aware of some things that need to be done that with involved moving. But
Mm.
having that financial planner and advisor, I do know before that I did call mine and they said, well, we can't help you because you're out of the country. And that was quite some time ago. And I thought it was strange because I thought, well, I'm still your
I'm still your
client. My
client.
investments are
My
still with
circumstances
you.
haven't changed. Yeah. Yeah, it's actually legislated. It's not that your advisor's playing hard to get and wants to see you. It's law. So the other things to consider, like in the country you're moving to, are you going to apply for permanent residency? Are you going to become a citizen? Because that involves a whole lot of other laws. I've managed to become a British citizen with a British passport while living in Australia, so I have secondary citizenship. And when I'm over in the UK, I'm unable to open a bank account because I'm not a resident. So there's those sort of laws that have to be considered as well. Can you open a bank account where you're going, or do you have to actually be residing there with the tax file numbers? I know in the States, I can't walk into, Wells Fargo and say, can I have an account, please? Because I don't have a social security number. So those kind of laws need to be taken into account with the country where you're going as well. How will you access your money to live? Does it have to stay an account in the country of current residence and you use a Visa card or something like that? So little everyday things, those, need to be worked out as well.
And especially if you are using credit cards, debit cards, and things, because I do know that people do use them that way. And I just think the amount of money that's being spent on fees
Yeah.
can
Those
become
international
substantial,
conversion
especially if
fees.
it's credit card. Now, I guess to reduce that in a way, if you go to an ATM, you pay one fee and you're able to take out a substantial amount of money that's going to last,
Which isn't
ideally all
always,
month or a couple of weeks or something. But still, even if
yeah.
you're doing it every week, that will add
But
up over
again, if you're
time.
in a country that's not super safe, you don't want to be walking around with large amounts of money either. And often the banks who go,
Right.
look, we don't charge you international fees, they'll get you on the conversion rate. So, I mean, they're not working for free. So, working out the best way to even access your money while you're overseas, maybe it's a travel money card, or travelers checks that seem to have gone the way of the dodo. But what is the best way to
Mhm.
do it? You're not a traveler anymore if you're going to be residing there, so you want the easiest, cheapest, best, and most convenient option.
Right. And another thing to think about with that as well too is if you are opening a business. And then how, because some people think, oh, like a common thing from Australia, North America, and a lot of countries, oh, well, I open a business and I'll just use PayPal or I'll just use Stripe and get paid, and then that'll go into, my local account. So even if you do get a local account, PayPal and Stripe don't work within every country. Like right now, I'm in Montenegro and I have a place here. And I do have a bank account here, but some of those like PayPal does not work with Montenegro Bank. So any money that is put into my PayPal, I either have to use that to pay out for things, or I have to put it into a different bank account that I have, because that that payment doesn't work here,
Yeah, so
like
and
that
there's fees on
transfer.
each of those transactions then. So yeah,
Yeah.
but there does seem to be
It
much
is
a big
definitely.
sorry.
No, no, that's okay. We have just a slight delay in each, and so
Yeah, the
that's
time.
that's why I will wait a moment longer to not to interrupt.
All good, all good. Sorry, go ahead. I was saying with the
Oh, can
global
you hear
movement
me? It
now
was
of
frozen for
people.
a second.
Oh, sorry. No, I said if you wanted to go ahead before I rudely cut you off.
Go ahead, it's okay.
No, so with the huge movement of people now with, like you mentioned too earlier, that cost of living crisis. I've got two clients now who have chosen Mexico. For Australia, Bali and Thailand are very close for lower cost of living, but also understanding, can you just pick up a unit that's yours all the time over there? Not every country allows foreigners to purchase. And if you do, are you going to be caught up in a scam and lose the money? Do you have to belong to a local corporation? Does it need to be owned in a local's name? How do you manage those kind of conflicts? Or do you just rent when you're there? So there's so many things to consider when jumping into the expat world. I think getting advice from people who've done it is really important. Perhaps joining local community pages from where you're going could be a great idea. But there's lots to consider, and finance is just one part of that.
Definitely. It is a whole I guess I often say to people, when they're wanting to move and if they say one of the first things is I need something that's more affordable. And I completely understand that. I have been recently in Canada and the United States, and I see what the prices are there. I'm sure Australia's probably, not far off. And I can compare that to Spain and Montenegro, and it is quite a bit less where I'm at. But I've even seen the increase in prices locally. And it is one thing to want to move to have a more comfortable lifestyle and make it more affordable. That definitely is one aspect. But another thing to consider is, like, where are you going? What about the language, the culture, the lifestyle? Do you want to be, or is it okay to be, 12 hours, 18-hour flight away from your home city? Your family, your friends are there, or maybe you want to get that far away from them. I don't know. But
Possible.
there is more than just that finance aspect.
Yeah, I think that culturally is a big one, because what we've environmentally grown up with and are comfortable with. Some cultures, when you go to other places, just little things. In Japan, it's not rude to stare, and that can be
Mm.
confronting. So, I mean, beautiful culture, so hospitable and really lovely, but just this little difference. So those kind of things can really add up and irk us over time if they're not something we're used to. Like you said, it might be really tough, to be that far away from the kids or the grandkids or your elder aging parents or your support groups
Mm.
for so long. So I think trying things also, the old try before you buy. Why don't you go for a holiday for 1 month in that area and see, or 6 weeks? Are you raring to get home at the end of that? Or are you really comfortable and happy there and go, look, maybe in the second half of the year, we'll come back and do it for 2 months and see how we go, and build up so that you are getting a greater understanding. And you're also building your local knowledge bank as well. So, where's the best spot that the locals go for the fruit, or the fish market, or the greatest cafe for the best coffee in the area, those kind of things that matter to you. You're building that knowledge bank, and you will meet other expats where you go. And there's usually great expat communities. So becoming involved in that as well can also give you those tips and things that you'd like to be able to better navigate where you go.
Definitely. And I also say to people too, when you first go, now depending upon how many times you've been there and have done things, but generally speaking, unless you know the city or town wherever you're moving very well, it's almost like you're going to be on vacation for those first few weeks or months while you're learning everything, and it's going to cost you more than what you think. Because until you learn or know where the best market is with good produce, with the best prices, and the local cafe that most people go to for that good coffee, not the kind of touristy places, the where the best deals are in the grocery stores and things like that. I have found every time that I've moved, my first couple of months are always more expensive. And it's that learning curve. And sometimes even so when the first time I moved and I was in Costa Rica, I went to the main grocery store and I knew it was expensive, but it was just convenient because everything else was so new and I was dealing with the language and school for my daughter and figuring everything out and just like everything that I was just like, I just want something that's somewhat convenient. And it was convenient and it had a lot of things in it that I knew and I could get a lot of, imported stuff. And I ended up spending quite a bit more because of it, but I was okay with it at that time because I was like, there's just so much new going on that it is nice to sometimes have that. And then after a bit, it's like, okay, I need to focus on this grocery bill situation because I am spending way too much money and I know it can be less. And so it is kind of picking those priorities of what needs to be those focuses first. What do you know right now? And then what are those others? Like they had said to me, if your phone isn't working, you need to call the phone company and let them know that your phone's not working. I said, well, if my phone's not working, how do I call? He said, well, you have to, maybe use a cell phone or go to the neighbors. And I'm like, well, if mine's not working, the neighbors should probably be
Maybe.
not working or there's something wrong. But so anyway, one day my phone's not working. So I drive out to the phone place and I say like my I don't know what's going on. My phone's not working. And he pulls it up and he's like, well, you didn't pay your bill. And I said, oh, I'm like, I'm sorry, I didn't get a bill. Like I didn't, and he looks at me, he's like, well, you don't get a bill. I'm like, well, then how do I know I have a bill to pay? He's like, you know, you have a bill to pay. Every month you have a bill to pay. And I said, but I'm like, I just moved here. Like I didn't know. I'm like, okay, like, sorry, my fault. I'm learning. And I said, well, I'm like, okay. And so in my head, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, they cut off my phone. Like, how much is this bill? So I said, how much? And he told me what it was in colonas. And he's like $5 US. And I started laughing. And then I stopped because he was very serious. I'm like, I'm sorry. I'm like, but you cut off my bill over $5? And he looks, he's like, well, you didn't pay your bill. And I said, fair enough.
Yeah.
And I said, I didn't know I had a bill. And so I said, well, can I give you 20 and pay months in
In
advance?
advance.
No, you come back next month and you pay your bill. I thought, okay, so I have to pay my bill and know I have a bill without actually getting a bill. And the phone is just one example. It's the same with the water. It was the same with the electricity. So whenever the power went out, my daughter would say, Mom, did you pay the power
Did
bill?
you pay the
And I would have
bill?
to think sometimes. So I was like, did I pay it? I don't, because sometimes the power would just go out. And there was times that I'd remember and I'd say, yes, I paid last week. Like I know I paid. And other times I would have to think about it. And I would go there and I'd be, I have no power, or if it was the water place or whichever. And some occasionally they say, yes, you didn't pay. And I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry, I forgot. And other times they would say, no, it must just be out. I'm like, okay, thank you.
Which in,
So, and it's
first world societies, we're not often as used to those inconveniences that may affect more developing
mm,
nations if that's where we're going to move. So, what can be what we consider, first world problem when the Wi-Fi is a bit slow, maybe a really serious problem where you're moving to. So those sort of differences are really important to understand as well. And when you mentioned at the start of that, you were choosing to pay for convenience. Many of us have that lot, luxury in life now. It's, well, I really don't feel like walking to the clothesline today. I will just throw my clothes in the dryer and I will pay that extra, dollar it costs to run my electricity to get my clothes dry within the hour or two. So, we often have that trade-off now, don't we? Of, is it convenient for me? Is that
yes.
going to be make my life easier? Versus, okay, if this is a financial decision to move somewhere else, then am I making sure I'm making the most of those financial opportunities that I've got now to save money or make my retirement funding go further? Or am I just going to keep paying for convenience? So, yeah, there's so many things to consider.
Right. It is really true. And there's a lot of things that I think a lot of people, not everybody, and I know it's not good to put everybody into kind of one bin or one basket. But I do think a lot of times that we do waste money. Some of us waste a lot of money, some of us waste a little bit. And waste could be a little bit of those conveniences. Um, but other times, do we really need something? And especially if you're thinking that you want to move abroad within the next year. Like, I think people should, especially if you have a family and kids, a minimum year is what is a good amount of time to start planning, because you want to talk to your financial advisor and make planning and talk about what investments you have and how it's going to work. A tax person, how is the tax going to work exiting? And then in the new country, if you're a resident there, how does that work? But if you're even kind of thinking about it, and even in general, even if you're not thinking about moving, honestly, just quit buying stuff you don't need. Like, really, we buy so much stuff. And I think it was Gary Vaynerchuk, and it was a long time ago that he had said, people just need to go through their house and start selling stuff that they don't use. Like, everybody, almost everybody has things in their home that we don't use, that we don't need. And if we're shopping, like even for me now, because I am considering moving again next year, I don't know where, but and I do travel quite a bit, and I think I love dresses. I love having dresses. I love being in places where I can just throw on a dress and done. It's nice, it's warm, all of that stuff. But then I think even now, if I buy a new dress, like, do I really need it? No. And so I came up with a rule when I was traveling because I just had my luggage and the weight was an issue traveling. And so years ago, I decided if I buy something new, I need to get rid of something. So if I'm buying a new dress, I have to get rid of a dress because I don't need a new dress. And if I don't want to get rid of any of my dresses, don't go dress shopping. Don't go shopping at all. Don't even go window shopping. Don't go looking. One of the things I love about being in Montenegro is there is no Amazon delivery to your door, anything. And for me, I think it's great. I spent months in the United States and I didn't use it either just because I'm so used to not because I don't need stuff because every time I go to buy, I think about it. Do I really need it? Because if I have X dollars and everybody has their X dollars, I think of it in a few ways of, do I really need it? Is it going to make me happy? For how long will it make me happy? And will I really remember this? So it's, would I spend $100 on a pair of jeans or $100 on a dress? Just for easy things. Absolutely, a dress was where I would go. But then it's, okay, if I spend that $100 on a dress, living in Europe, $100 can be a flight somewhere. So it's like, do I really need another dress or would I rather fly to whatever place and have a weekend or a long weekend or a week or whatever it may be? And I think about those things of, what would I really rather have? What do I need? And then what would I really rather have? And for me, it's almost always experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you on that one. I think the other really important thing, though, is when we're doing something that we may consider, I'm depriving myself. I'm going to be good and I'm not going to buy that dress or the $100 pair of jeans. I think making sure that that $100, or even if it's the $5 for the coffee, which is an Australian price, which is
Mhm.
awful, that we put it somewhere. It either has to go down to paying off that credit card debt that we've been talking about forever, or an extra $5 on the mortgage, or into our travel savings account. So we're going, well, we were prepared to spend that on something, on stuff. Do we
Mhm.
want to, are we prepared to spend it then on getting rid of debt or putting it towards the next experience? So making sure it counts
Right.
is really important, because if it stays in the account, we'll just find something else to spend it on. It'll just go on groceries. It'll just go on the next bill. It'll just go on our life as money does. So being really intentional with where the money goes is really important.
I think that that is really good advice. And so one thing that I've started to do is I've got some books and things that I sell online and I don't really market them or promote them. So whenever I get the income from them, what I'm starting to do now is I just automatically take that and I put it into some cryptocurrencies. So I'm investing because I think if I, as you said, if I just put it in my bank account, I'm just going to spend it. It's even if it just sits there over time, it's losing money with inflation right now, and it's not really doing anything. Now, if obviously if I need it, that's one thing, but it's one of those things that we can always live off of less when we have less. Right? Like we find a way to do it. And so if it is that $5 a coffee you have 3 times a week, just have one a week and take that extra $10, and I said, put it on the credit card, put it in a different account that you don't see it, so it's like it's spent, and that account could be for whatever type of savings, investment, future travel, whatever it may be, because I like, as you said, that if you were gonna spend it anyway, you might as well put it so it's more useful than just in the bank where it will eventually just get spent anyway. And you're not going to see the amount that you would have spent that we can now use for something that we're going to enjoy more.
Yeah, I remember when my son was 17 and first started work, he'd forgot that I still had viewing access on his bank account. And after he'd worked for a few months, I checked and, every morning he'd stop for a coffee at the local shop and he might, grab some banana bread or a piece of toast or something. And then he was buying lunches at work because that was way cooler than, taking your own lunch. And I looked through his accounts and it was $230 to $300 a week that he was just blowing on stuff that he didn't need, just being young and inexperienced, and because he could for the first
Mhm.
time in his life. And when I sat him down and showed him, he was absolutely horrified because $5 here and $10 there and $15 here, that's not a lot of money. But boy, did it add up quickly when it was 2 and 3 times a day, every day of the week. And then he'd go out with his mates on the weekend. So he was pretty horrified. And I said, look, do we come up with a plan? Can you still have your coffee every day, but you take your lunch? I'm not saying to, again, deprive yourself of everything, but you have to be a whole lot smarter than you're being. So, what's going to give? So, we came up with a really good plan of how to make things work. And wherever you are, those concepts still work.
Definitely. And yeah, I think I can't remember who it was that I said, I think it was one of the guys off a Shark Tank or something, or one of those types of shows, and said the worst thing that you can be doing is going and out and buying coffee. Because when you make coffee at home, like get a cup, a little thermos thing, and a to-go cup, and make coffee at home and bring it with you, because it costs, I can't remember what it was. He was saying it's like it was 10
Sense.
cents to make a cup, and people are spending 4, 5, $6 for one coffee. And it does add up. And you're right. At first we think it's always those little things, because you think, oh, it's a few dollars. It's 5, 7, 10, $12, or the better, oh, that's on sale. I'm saving money. It's like, and I used to be one of those. I used to be like, oh, it's on
We're all
sale. Look, I'm saving it.
guilty.
It's like, really? Now looking back, it's like I was still spending, still I wasn't really saving. Um, but and part of it is stages of life, and I get that. Being really young and first jobs and things like that, we do tend to be a little bit more frivolous
Well,
and
it's
spend more and
exciting and
enjoy.
new.
Yeah, it is, and we can now, and I've earned it. But it is exactly as you said, to still enjoy, but then it is a bit of a balance, because I mean, we work for our money, right? And we want to live, and we want to enjoy, and we want to be comfortable, and we want to have some of those things that we like, and we want to, I'll say, treat ourselves. That's what it needs to be. It's the treat ourselves and really enjoy it. Have maybe sometimes have less, but better quality. Have more of a quantity over, or more of a quality over the quantity. And then with that other money, then to put it to either reduce the debt, because that's a big one. Those interest rates on credit cards and things are just, it's crazy that they're allowed to
Yes.
charge the amount that they do. It really is insane. Um, and then to have those enjoyable things, because if let's say it's a holiday and you put, instead of all of those coffees, and you go on that week-long holiday, you're going to enjoy that holiday and talk about it. And then after that, it's going to be very easy to put that coffee money into the next holiday fund, or the
Mm.
next whatever concert, if it may be, if there's a big concert coming up, whatever that thing is that we like, that we do on a rare occasion, that makes it more affordable and more enjoyable, as opposed to another coffee from a big chain store that isn't really that good anyway.
True. Yeah, Starbucks hasn't done that well in Australia. We're dreadful coffee snobs in Australia. But I think also a good lesson for ourselves and to pass on to our children is, what's my hourly rate? If you're an employee, you might be on $5 an hour, you might be on $30 an hour, whatever your rate of pay is, does it cost you 1 hour of work to buy that coffee? Or the pair of jeans? Is that 1 or 2 hours of work? What do you have to do to achieve that? And, if the kid breaks the iPad and goes, Mummy, I need the new iPad, sit down and work out, Mummy has to work for a day, a week, however long it takes. The bank of mum or dad, you know, that
Mhm.
it's not just, sure, we'll go out and get you a new iPad. I have to go to work to cover this much money to replace what you've done. So they're really good little learning lessons also for kids about, not every parent wants to teach that time equals money. It might be opportunities, but, for many people, time and money are, interchangeable and equal. So
Mhm.
how do we make the best of those things? What can we say no to? Is it going to cost me 2 hours of my work? And would I really rather put that towards something else?
Yeah, it's true. And just to go with that note on with children, when my daughter was younger and she was starting to make money, I can't remember if it was birthday money or what, but she had some money and we were at the store and she wanted something. And I said, "No, I'm not buying that for you." When it was something that I just thought was stupid. So I was just thought, "No,
Junk.
I'm not buying that." I said, but you have money and you have enough money that you can buy that." And she looks and she goes, "I'm not spending all my money on that." I said, "Well, if you're not
Yes,
willing to
no.
spend your money on it, why should I spend my money on it?" And then she says, "Well, you have way more money than I do." And I said, "Yes, I do." I said, "But I also pay for the house and the car and the gas and the groceries and your clothes." And I said, "So if you want to find a way to pay for all of that, I'll buy you that toy or whatever it was." But it was just so funny that when she realized of, "Oh, I want it if you buy it for me, but I don't like it enough to spend my money on it."
Yeah, big lesson. When my son was younger, he, of course, like every, teenager, wanted a PlayStation. And I said, look, I'm not someone who thinks gaming is a great idea for teenage kids. I get it's a thing and I'm a dinosaur. But I said to him, I won't stop you from buying one. And I mean, I think they were around $300 to $500, even, this is close to over 10 years ago. So I said, if you can figure out a way of earning the money to get it, I won't stop you. But what I want is you to do the research. You need to either get online or visit some shops, tell me who's got the best deal, if you can lay by it instead of afterpay back in the olden days. And, for the best price, are you going to get some games or cables or whatever the add-ins are? So go away and present me with 3 deals, and then we're going to work out how you're going to make the money. So he came back and one of the local stores had the better deal where he could get 2 games and an extra cable for the same price as others. And then he said, well, I'm going to start a car wash, local car washing run. So, friends would come over and for 20 or $30, he'd wash their car. And some of his friends were scoffing at him, and then others were like, well, that's not a bad idea. Maybe we should start that too. And then he got a little entrepreneurial. He's like, wait a minute. If I give my mate $10 to wash the car and I charge 20 or 30, I can actually make $20 by doing nothing. So he started to think like a little businessman. And I
Mhm.
said to him at the end, like he did it. I said to the game store when we went in and he could put his deposit down. I said, look, he's working his way through this. Does it matter if the lay-by is paid on time? They're just look regular payments as long as, he can pay it off over time. It doesn't matter if it takes a bit longer. And at the end of it, when he'd bought it, it was something he was proud of because he'd had to put the effort in. And I said, well, now, if you keep doing the car washing, you can buy more games or down the track. He's like, no, I got what I wanted now. I'm all done. So for him, it was just, an episode, which I was so disappointed about. But he got what he wanted and he put the effort in. I hadn't stopped him. He'd learnt some interesting lessons. So, now he still goes away and gets 2 or 3 deals because he knows the difference in the value of, what you can get. So it was kind of
Mhm.
one of those, I was just doing because I was refusing to pay, but it was some great life lessons that he still uses even now. So, there's some fun stuff we can teach the kids without, sitting down and drawing up a budget and boring them to death with how money actually works and what it does cost to pay for houses and shoes and gas and all that stuff.
Yeah, and it's funny too as we're teaching and they have those lessons, that's great. And then I think though sometimes then we need to look at those lessons again ourselves because over time we kind of tend to forget. And when we look at something as you just said is okay, well I make X dollars an hour or X dollars per client. How many clients do I need to have, or how often do I get a client? What do how much do I need to do to get that client, or how many hours do I have to work depending upon what people do for a living? And then to look at those items and think, do I really want it? Do I really need it? Is it gonna improve my life or whatever matrix that people want to use? But I find unfortunately we're part of with the finance, and I get it though too, is a lot of people just aren't happy with their lives. And so therefore we tend to buy things to make us happy because they do initially. We love that new dress, the new shoes, the new games, the whatever it may be, but then and it's just that quick dopamine hit that we like it, and then it just wears off. So then we have to buy more. And then we need to keep getting that happiness type feeling and those dopamine hits. So it really is to look at our life and say, okay, what are my expenses that I need? I mean, we all need food, clothing, shelter. We need those things. Then, what are the little treats that I like to have, or what am I spending a lot of money on that I can really cut down and have it as more of a treat than an everyday coffee? Maybe it's a Friday coffee, right? And we have that. And then it is paying down those debts and finding activities or hobbies or things that we can do that we enjoy doing that bring us that happiness so then we don't have to be buying things. Because when we look around the world and we look at economies and countries, and if we look at the happiness index, the happiest people in the world are never the ones that have the highest cost of living, most developed. Like Canada, the United States, Australia, Germany, Norway, like, well, maybe Norway, but I don't know exactly, but generally those ones are not considered like the happiest countries in the world. When we
No, the
look
little
at
islands of
places
Vanuatu
that,
are often, yeah,
yeah,
Vanuatu is a very undeveloped little nation, but often touted as the happiest place on earth. And I think sometimes
mhm,
the lack of complexity is what causes the happiness.
yeah, yeah, and so it's finding that. So if people want to, you're looking at your budget, finding a way if you want to move abroad or you don't, and you just want to figure out how can life be a little bit better. It's being honest and sometimes being honest with ourselves kind of hurts a little bit. But
Yeah,
I
it is
think
hard.
it really is looking honestly at that picture and being okay. What is my financial situation? Where am I at? What do I need to do to change it?
And like you said, that honesty with ourselves, it can hurt because if we are someone who constantly spends or a hoarder or someone who constantly needs stuff, there's often an underlying psychological reason behind that. And I know after the war years when people were so deprived, many came back and did become dreadful hoarders because they never knew where their next meal was coming from. They had to repair every pair of shoes. The girls had to darn their stockings. The men had to, put extra notches in their belts. It wasn't a wasteful time because there wasn't stuff. And so they got this tendency then to hoard everything because they didn't know where the next things were coming. So there can be psychological issues behind why we do what we do. And we're not even aware of why is our relationship with money like this, or a relationship with stuff. If we did have to pack up and go overseas tomorrow, and you look around our house going, where do I start? Like when a partner who's a hoarder passes away, and the one who's left behind has this mountain of stuff to get through before they can move on with their life. It's a very difficult thing for people to leave, behind their burdens of that. It's overwhelming for other people to have to deal with. So understanding, oh, is that what that's about? Oh, I didn't realize that's why I did that. There's this childhood thing, or I was raised to believes X. Does that still serve me? I didn't even realize it was a thing. Can just be that, the scales come off and we go, you know what? I don't need that anymore. I'm okay. I'm enough. I don't need to buy ABCD all the time to fill that gaping hole that I thought was there. That's really not.
Yeah. Yeah, there's often underlying issues to many things. And as you said, whether it's a person that's a hoarder or a person that's a spender, and they just don't want to have any money in their bank, and subconsciously they just make sure to spend it. It was even I was listening to I don't think it was a TED Talk, could have been, but anyway, it was a talk anyway, and a person was saying when we look at even people who are alcoholics, it's not the alcohol that's the problem. And most times think like, "Why are you alcoholic? Why are you drinking?" What and the alcohol is to them the answer to what their problem is. And so it's finding out what is going them on that's making them want to drink and making them do that, because just the stopping of drinking, there is those underlying problems. And so if somebody is a hoarder or a spender or, um anything kind of in between, like, where are we at? What is those underlying issues? And a lot of them do come from when we're kids, and we may not even really remember it. It could be just conversations or arguments or whatever that we heard as a child that we don't even really remember.
I wrote a book a few years ago called Financial Secrets Revealed, and it was like an interview style book where I spoke to people who were surviving on Social Security right through to people who are entrepreneurs making, multi-million dollars on different countries, and a handful of financial advisors as well. And one of the questions I asked all of them was, what did your parents teach you about money? And the answer overwhelmingly was nothing. And I said, okay, have a think back. What things did you hear all the time? And it could be simple things like money doesn't grow on trees. It takes money to make money. It's up to the man to bring home the bacon. Those, we think they were kind of almost unspoken, that you didn't get sat down and like, this is a life lesson, son. I need to teach you about this. There was no moment of that. They were these throwaway comments and lines. And one lady had a think, and she said, every time we were in the car and we drove past a nice house, my dad would say, they must be really bad people in there because only really bad people get ahead financially. So they're probably drug dealers. And
Oh.
she's now, married to a guy living in the States. And she said, every second house you're driving past through Orange County, she's like, is every single one of those a drug dealer? So she had to really challenge all these thoughts that, she'd been inculcated with through no fault of her own. It was just her upbringing. And she had to challenge all those
Mhm.
beliefs. Doesn't mean you're a bad person just because you've had money. Or was that the father's excuse for not wanting to work? Or be a greater provider, or whatever his reasons were for thinking that. Was it handed down to him, or was it something he'd come up with? I
Mhm.
think just examining those things is a fascinating way of, it's another relationship we've got. So, we examine our personal relationships all the time. Is this still serving me? So even our belief systems about different things, it's really cool to sit back and go, why do I even believe that? Did my parents pass it down? Was I being rebellious, and it's completely opposite to what my parents believed, just because I wanted to be a bit of a rebel at that time when I came up with this thought, or I was 16 when I came up with that. Was that my brightest idea? So, all those things to challenge over time.
it really is true because, I mean, I just over the years of just myself, I've realized my beliefs, they aren't right and they aren't wrong. They're just from what I've experienced from my parents teaching me things or me hearing things from them, my teachers, my grandparents, my friends' parents, all of those
Yep.
things. And we hear all kinds of things and we don't realize that every one of those things we're assuming as children and growing up, like, that's it's true. They're right, like, parents are always
They're
right,
the
grandma's
grown-ups,
always
they
right,
know.
you know, my they are, and so and I look back and I always think when I've talked to different friends, because 'cause we've all had different lives, and my one oh, I have one friend, she's a very good friend of mine, and, her parents were born and she was born in Poland and then moved to Canada, so it was communist Poland at the time, and she's like, "My parents messed me up and blah, blah, blah," and I'm like, "Okay, well, your parents did the best they could because of how they lived, and they did the best because of your grandparents, right? And so the life now in Canada is very different than what it was, but they did what they could, and especially in that situation, and I often say, if I was taken as a child at, 1 or 2 years of age and moved into a different home, a different country, a different financial situation, any or all of those, my beliefs would be completely different, my thoughts would be different, and it's not that I'm different, it's because the surroundings, and so that doesn't make my thoughts or beliefs right or wrong, they just are, and then we have to question them as, "Is this the best for me? Does this belief benefit me or harm me? Is it helping me get to whatever I want, the lifestyle that I want to have or the freedom that I wanna have or whatever that is that we kind of dream about or think about? Are these things that I think helping me or not?" Because none of them really are true or false, they just are because of the situation.
And I think the best question in that situation is it serving me? Is it bringing out the best in me? So
Yeah,
it's like you said, it's not right or wrong, and everyone can have lots of different ideas. And we have been shaped by massive upheaval since the turn of the 1900s. You know, our parents and grandparents have been through experiences we can't imagine. I mean, we haven't had wars like, the Great War of 1914 and, World War II following, where
right,
people are sent off to die by the millions. So, and then, depressions and famines and diseases and plagues like we've only just had recently again. So, all of those things massively shape the people who came before us and always have.
right.
So, how
Yeah,
much of what we're taught is very much, related to their issue. And then all of a sudden there's this time of abundance. Our children haven't lived through a war that's impacted them in their lifetime.
no,
You know, I haven't lived, and I've just turned half a cemetery. So, I haven't had a war impact my life like our parents and grandparents did. So we
right.
haven't had to deal with, the massive migration after a war where all these people going, we're giving our children a better start in a new country so that, that's so brave. I mean, most of us now aren't, we're doing it because, oh, I want to live in a cheaper spot or I want to go surfing for the rest of my life. So it's these lifestyle decisions, not I need to get my family out of communist Poland for a better start and then going, oh my God, you messed me up.
Mm,
Because the motives weren't about that. It was about how do we give our family a better
right.
life? And here we are going, oh, you're all just mental. So yeah, it's sometimes a difficult journey to understand, but like you said, it's the beliefs may not be right or wrong. They're shaped by our circumstances, but we individually have to ask, is it serving me?
Right. And in most situations, it isn't. Unless somebody's gone through that process and been like, "Okay, why do I believe this? Is it serving me? What do I need to do?" And it's not like we just think about it once and, "Oh, yay, I'm so
No.
much better now." Like, or
Having a
we
coffee
keep
and
going back.
too funny. There was one other thing I wanted to mention for the expats as well when you do move to another country is to understand the tax laws, not only of where you're going, But if you're still a resident of the United States and you move overseas, do you still need to do a tax return at home? Are there double tax treaty laws where you go? Because some people for years and years have no idea that they were still meant to be filing their tax return in
Yeah.
America, even though they've been living somewhere else. So also understanding those things instead of, 20 years later going, oh my God, suddenly I've got this humongous bill I didn't know about or something. So, when we're talking about seeing the professionals to get your, house in order before you leave, super important one to, I just, yeah, remembered as well. So,
Yeah. And especially for US citizens, because I recently had a woman, and she said, I heard that I'm supposed to be filing paperwork in the US. I'm a US citizen, but I moved when I was a kid and I've never been back. And she's in her mid-30s now. She's like, I've never lived there. I don't own anything there. She's like, I've never filed any documents or paperwork or anything. And I'm like, oh, that's not
a
good.
problem.
Because I'm like, you're supposed to be filing every single year. She said, but I left as a teenager, like as a kid. I don't even know if she was a teenager yet. And I said, government doesn't care. You're a US citizen. You have to be filing every year unless you renounce your citizenship, which for you, I was saying to her, I was like, for you, you might want to consider renouncing that citizenship. If you have no intentions of ever going back there, ever living there, ever anything, it does you no good to have that citizenship because you got to be filing and you may not be paying because she was in a tax treaty country. I said, but you were supposed to be filing for 18 years or however many it had been.
And I mean,
um,
how do you even
so
find
we
those
need to
records?
get this resolved, and then you need to think about it.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
some cases, it's impossible to find those records. So how do you prove 20 years ago, were you even earning? What did you earn? And yeah, so just a little
Yeah, I mean,
tip
i
for
could i could never. Yeah, I could never prove it because I think, and every country has their rules, and I think most countries, I'm assuming, and I could be off on these years, are kind of that anywhere between 5 to 8 years, that you want to keep your tax returns, and then you can uh, shred them after that, just in case they decide to audit you for whatever reason. They just pulled your
because
lucky
they can.
security number and it's your time to be audited, even though it was from 3 4 years ago. You've got to be like, oh, here's all my documents. And that
Mm,
happens.
it
Governments
does.
do random audits, and it could be for previous years, however many they're allowed to go back. And so it is important to keep that. But once those years are gone, then I go back and I think, okay, what are the years? Okay, I can now shred those and get rid of those documents. Then it'd be like, I don't know what I made. I was 20, 25, 30,
Yeah,
35 type things. Like, I
yeah,
keep
wouldn't have a
track of
clue.
that now.
Yeah, so
Well,
just a little, I
Amanda,
mean, there's lots of tips and traps. So yeah, good. Just another one to be
yeah.
aware of.
Absolutely. And it's so then it really is about talking to people, speaking to your financial advisor, speaking to an international tax person in your home country, and then also speaking with the tax people in the country where you're planning to move to. What type of residency are you having there? That can make a difference. And there's definitely a number of things. And to start saving or stop spending on things, especially if you're going to move, because what's the point of buying stuff if you're just going to have to spend more to move it or to sell it? You're never going to get what you paid for it. And sometimes if you're moving where the whole like lifestyle design, like clothing just isn't the same in different countries. You just wouldn't wear the same types of things. So you're not always going to bring all of your clothing. So to have those kind of thoughts moving forward of, if this is where I want to move, let's get our finances in order a bit. Let's try to pay off those debts. Let's stop buying stuff, maybe slowly start to sell things online and lighten that. And I mean, when I just find when I have less stuff, I just feel lighter.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a psychological thing, isn't it? And, we go through stages where, I think my husband bought me golf clubs for one anniversary with 5 lessons. And apart from those 5 lessons, I've never used those clubs again. So there's, things like that build, taking up space in the garage. So, that can go. It's And again, we
Mhm.
do collect stuff, and it is heavy over time.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely is. Well, Amanda, I know that you've written several books, including the one that you mentioned here. And so, for people who are listening in Australia and they want to connect with you or potentially work with you, or people who are interested in buying your books, where is the best place for people to connect with you?
Look, you can find me everywhere if you Google Amanda Cassar. The one in America does yoga, so look for the one who's the financial advisor from Australia. Um, you can buy my book, Financial Secrets Revealed, on all the usual suspects: Amazon, Barnes and Noble, those things. LinkedIn profile is probably the easiest place to find me, and amandacassar.com.au. So, look, thank you so much for having me, Sally. I know we've gone down the rabbit hole today and gone all over the place, but it's been a lot of fun. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your time, Amanda. And I'll make sure to put the links to everything in the show notes to make it easy for everybody to connect with you. And I think we've talked about a lot of different points though that are important, whether it's, for our kids, for ourselves, for staying where we're at, moving abroad, whatever it may be. There definitely are all things to consider. So thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for having me.